We're going to talk about anti-aging.
What is the likelihood of a 40-year-old would live forever or at least not die from aging?
More than 50%.
What's interesting here is he says we'll actually cure aging by 2036.
He had a consultant to make him live to his 120. This year, you get access to handheld skin cancer scanners, so you use your phone to just scan your body. You can get a vaccine that will automatically hit that cancer. We're going to talk about anti-aging and long, healthy life, and this is something that you and I have experienced in our daily life, I would say, because at least I have seen some changes in how my friends and people I work with behave. And I told you about that meeting I had in London the other day. So I meet this American businessman, and he's very energetic, and we talk non-stop, discuss complicated technology and whatnot, for what it ends up being 3.5 hours. But at one point during the conversation, he asked, "How old do you think I am?" And then I say, I think I would always say, "I'm not sure, you tell me." And then I said, "I'm turning 84. And I was just thinking, if you ask somebody, a child who's 6 years old, how old they are, they say, "I'm turning 7, because they are kind of embarrassed that they're only 6, so they want to make themselves sound a little bit older. But he was kind of saying, "I'm turning 84. And he had a consultant who has the mandate to make him live to his 120, and he's certainly living accordingly, because he's starting a lot of different interesting projects. And I'm a member of a crowd of predominantly Danish entrepreneurs, and most of them, they have a longevity chat forum on WhatsApp, and they're almost without exception trying to live extremely healthy. And I haven't seen that to the same extent just 5 years ago, and certainly not 10 years ago, where there will always be some people who do it, but not like that. And when I talk with them, and also the one I met in London, I find out that the main driver is not just to be healthy here now, but because they're beginning to think about longevity, so anti-aging technology, which means that if you can stay healthy and alive maybe 10, 15 years more or so, then you will have all these magic things that can reset your age, and perhaps if you can stay alive 15 more years, you can get 150 unexpected bonus years in extension of your lifespan. And so this is, to me, it's a beginning of a mania, starting with some of the most, perhaps innovative people in the world, but also other people as well. So it's a super interesting subject.
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting subject. And just looking at this clip that I'm going to play here with Aubrey De Grey that I interviewed a couple of weeks back.
What is the likelihood of a 40-year-old person today who's in pretty good health, that person could live forever or at least not die from aging?
So I think that the chance for a 40-year-old today in the Western world is more than 50%. I have said that I've been giving time frame estimates for how long it's going to take to get to LEV for some time. And my current estimate is 12 to 15 years, in other words, late 2030s. And the people who will benefit from this kind of technology when it comes along will be people who are typically in their 60s at that time. So that means someone who's 40 now has a good chance.
What's interesting here is he says we will actually cure aging by 2036. At least there's a 50% probability of doing so. Looking at this clip, what do you think, Lars? Do you think we might be able to cure aging by 12 to 15 years?
I think some people will, and that means some people will experience great benefit from these technologies that are emerging. Other people's not, because people are different. We have different genetic challenges and whatnot. But for some people, I do believe that a lot is coming, and I believe in that because I've seen all the different animal studies, etc. So we know that it works in some laboratory conditions. So I'm hopeful.
So what about yourself? I mean, it must be pretty difficult not to think about whether this could impact yourself and make you live a lot longer than you would first anticipate.
Where I am is that intellectually I'm taking it on board, but somehow emotionally something in me doesn't believe in it. So I think we need to see some results. But what I have done though is I'm living healthy. I'm doing sport every day. I try to eat pretty healthy, get my sleep and so on. So if the opportunity is there, I'm preparing for it. I'm a prepper. I'm a longevity prepper.
But don't you think it's also society kind of holding back the mind? I mean, 10 years ago when I discussed this with colleagues from Facebook, they were like, what's going on with you? Are you completely nuts talking about rejuvenation and living much longer? I mean, I didn't dare bring it up again for several years because I didn't want people to think I was a nutcase. I think that it's changing a little bit, but still it's not quite enough to kind of also, I think, emotionally give yourself permission to really believe it. Is that the way you feel as well?
Yeah, I do. And I think that with a lot of technologies, people have had the same attitude that what we see here and what I, to some degree feel myself. So think about nuclear fusion power, will never happen, forget it. Think about AI. AI was a horrible place to do your academic career for many, many years. But then suddenly, poof, it's there. And it's not until you actually see it that you really kind of take it on board and say, okay, it's real. But as I said, I mean, some of the research is really compelling.
Yeah, I'm starting to meet more people where I can actually discuss this openly and where they're not giving themselves permission to really believe it either. But at least they're like, yeah, it might happen. And if it might happen, I want to be prepared. But I'm guessing you're mingling maybe with another crowd also than I am. Are you seeing people who are like not just preparing, but really preparing for this?
I have a few who take 30 different supplements a day and have a long list of things they don't touch ever. But most of the ones I know, they'll still go out and party, and they'll still drink some wine if it's good and if they're in good company and so on, which I think might actually be the wiser decision. But so it's a bit divided. But I know very few people in my close circle who are not longevity preppers, I would say.
I've actually noticed a difference with a lot of, I don't know if we should call it younger people, but at least the people I hang out with who are not touching alcohol anymore. I mean, when I was younger, it was like, you're not social if you don't drink alcohol. And now today, sometimes when I open a good bottle of wine, people look at me like, no, alcohol is not for me. So I'm seeing a shift there.
Yeah, but we are also a product of how we were brought up and all the habits that we have developed and the culture we are a part of. So I can understand that if you've never done it, that you decide never to do it. But I can also certainly associate it with that if you love wine and you have already had, all your life had access to it, that you want to continue, but just in a measured way, which is where I am. And we can get back to that, but we should also consider that one of the things that makes you live long without these supplements and miracle medications that are in the pipeline is simply being happy. So you also have to think about what makes you happy, and having a huge long list of things you don't want to do doesn't necessarily make you more happy. It might make you less happy and not be worth it.
I actually saw a funny TikTok on that where it says, don't drink any alcohol and replace your morning coffee with a green tea, and as a result you can remove all joy from your life.
Yeah, I've seen that also. Yeah.
I think that one is dangerous as well, right? I mean, what's the point in living forever if you're not having a good time? I actually met that quite a lot. I mean, the people who started kind of humoring the idea of living longer, they often said to me, but I'm not interested in living longer, and it won't be fun, and it's no fun getting old. It's actually interesting that what people have the hardest time imagining is that you would be old but you would be biologically young. I mean, most people picture themselves being 120 and everything is falling apart, even with these technologies.
Yeah, that's right. I was just in China, and I'm doing a lot of interviews and speeches, and most of them I talked about anti-aging as a part of the future. And I had this interview with two Chinese from a think tank. And then when I talk about the possibility of living to 120, 150, 200, or whatever it becomes, one of them, a lady, she had this super powerful reaction. She was like, "Oh no, I wouldn't want to live like that." And I was kind of taken aback, because for me it's such an oddity not to want to live long. Because if you don't want to live long, why do you want to live at all? You might as well kill yourself now if you don't like life. But if you like life, then you want as much of it as you can. And there are some really interesting aspects also of having a reasonable certainty that you will have a long lifespan. Because if you do that, then you don't have to make a decision for the rest of your life about career, about partner, about education, about where to live. So decisions will become easier, because you can just decide, this is what I do now. I go all in. I see where it takes me. I maybe will keep doing that forever, but maybe not. And if I don't, then there's plenty of time to do something else. So let's say you want to study at university, but you'd also like to become a jazz musician, and you have to make the choice. Now, if you have a long life, you can say, okay, I choose one now, and then later on I'll do the other. And then, something else will come up. And so the way I look at it is that the Earth is enormous. Even though I've traveled a lot, I haven't seen even 0.001% of it. So there's so many wonderful people, experiences, etc. So we will have an abundance of exciting things to do in our life and meaningful things, but we also would like to then have an abundance of life. So sometimes people talk about superabundance of commodities, which is what I believe that we are heading into. But we will also have superabundance of possible experiences and possible fulfilling activities. But then the shortage, the scarcity that we have is time, and if we can get that solved, that would be wonderful.
Before we jump on to the next point, I was thinking we should look at the Supertrends timeline. For the people who don't know, then the Supertrends platform have a lot of experts in different areas, including longevity, who predict what is going to happen in the future. Lars, could you share some of the predictions from the Supertrends platform?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. So I asked the machine to generate different information about everything that pertains to this subject. And the first part of it is actually about what you can do now. And I will not at all go into the details of that. But it's well known now that in order to stay healthy for a long time, of course, you need to have good nutrition. We already talked about that. Not too much processed food, don't get too overweight, etc. Don't drink half a bottle of whiskey a day, don't smoke. Movement and fitness is another one. It goes without saying. Lots of attention recently to sleep. So I have for many years tried to avoid using an alarm clock. Sometimes I have to, but generally I think it's a horrible thing to interrupt your own sleep, especially since the best part of the sleep is the last part. This deep REM. So that's important. And then there's something that I call happiness. So very often in these studies, for instance, of blue zones where people get very old, they talk about social interaction as number 4. But I think what number 4 really is about is that your body every day gets a good shower of happiness hormones, and they come in many different forms. So some relate to love, some relate to the feeling of flow when you work, and so on. So, for instance, I like to do intellectual work. That makes me very happy. I also like friends and so many other activities. I like to do sports. So these are different kinds of happiness experiences. but you need to have them many times a day in order to be healthy, in order to have a high chance of having a long life. But then something that is kind of, to me, partly a bridging technology, but also something that will be important forever on from now on, is the increasingly sophisticated way that we can monitor our health and find out what are our weakest points at any time, and address that, but also have this holistic treatment of our body, where body and mind is all supporting each other. For instance, we know that if you are mentally unhappy, then you also get physically ill, and vice versa. So we also know that if you have chronic inflammation in your body, then it gets less efficient at treating anything that hits it. So one of the things that we can use here is personal AI. So personal AI is not something that we really have now, but I think even in 25 we'll see it break through, and then it will become extremely widespread. So this is this little app on our phone that will guide us through life as we desire it to do. And this will then have information about ourselves that we allow it to get. And one of the things that more and more people do is a full genome sequencing, which can give us some indication of which foods we tolerate, which diseases we have increased risk of getting, and much more. So the personal AI can sort of adjust its guidance to that background knowledge. Then more and more people use wearables like finger rings, like wristwatches and so on, check how many steps they take, how they sleep at night and so on. I actually don't, but will try from time to time in the future. I don't want to be too monitored, but I think it's good to learn something about your body, maybe use some wearable 2 weeks so you learn how your body reacts to different things, then take it off, and then do it again after a year or so. Then you have different tests. You have the gut microbiome test, which turns out to be extremely useful because a lot of diseases and aging comes from problems there. And you can do say an annual or biannual or every 6 months a substantial blood screening, and with new technologies that can include liquid biopsies, which are ways to screen for very early indicators for 50 to 100 or 50 to 7 different kinds of cancer, so you can discover things really, really early. And there are more things. Some people take a full body MRI, maybe every year, every second year, where they can find out if there's some problems with circulation or structural deficiencies in the body that need to be tackled. So these are things that if you do a lot of it or all of it, you can get this wellness panel that tells you, oh, I need to adjust a little bit here, I need to be careful about this, I should eat this but not that, and so on. I should move more, I don't get enough sleep, I sleep bad if I drink 2 glasses of wine but not if I drink 1, whatever it is. So in that way we stay more healthy, but also we find out what is the weakest, or the maybe 2 or 3 weakest parts of our body and mind for that matter, and what can we do about it. Now if we go into what's going to happen in healthcare, I looked at our predictions. We have in Supertrends about 4,000 different predictions for future technology breakthroughs, scientific or commercial, and so I just pulled out a few. And actually, so this year you get access to handheld skin cancer scanners. So you use your phone to just scan your body, and it will raise alarms for things that you should have maybe take care of. I took this as an example here because there will be more and more of these technologies where you can use your phone and get an instant answer, so you don't need a doctor and you get the answer straight away. Very interesting area with a whole lot of predictions, but it's about cancer vaccines. The fact that you, through family history and full genome DNA screening, can get information about high or elevated risk of getting specific cancers, and then you can get a vaccine that will automatically hit that cancer if you get it, so you will actually not know that you get it because the cancer vaccine takes care of it. So that's in 2026. Then in 2027, efficient ways to deal if you have damage to your nerves. So some nerves have been torn apart. Traditionally, you can't do anything, but there will be degradable electric devices that you put in to connect the two nerve cells. It has to happen fairly quickly, though. So they're still active, and then they grow back together again. So very important. 28, a virus that destroys tumors is launched. Lots and lots of scientific experiments that show that this will work. But the matter is, when will it become approved for widespread use? So that shouldn't be so far away. Very elegant way to treat tumors. 28, brain scans can diagnose mental illness. I think it can also be used for positive psychology, just to tell you about whether you have growth mindset or fixed mindset and other things. So I think that's a thing. This will become a thing in living better lives and tackling things that maybe we're not doing so well. 2030, new stem cells grown in humans by microbots. So if you need to replace some cells in your body, you have these microbots that go in, sit there, and then they release stem cells that replace whatever tissue has been destroyed. That can be in your joints, for instance. And the whole tissue replacement thing is very big, so can also be in our guns, in our brain, and so on. 29, there's a whole new big area. This is autoimmune diseases where the body starts either fighting parts of itself or also allergy problems where the body starts fighting something in the external environment that it shouldn't. There are lots of vaccines in the pipeline to prevent this or cure this. And one of the biggest areas is type 1 diabetes. So there's an expectation that around 29 we can actually get a vaccine against type 1 diabetes. Then we have 29 also. We use CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing for personal cancer treatments. So this is where you go in and fix the genetic reason that you have a cancer with these treatments. Then 2030, the first patient to be operated on by microbots. This is something like, for instance, Ray Kurzweil would talk about a lot, that you actually can insert these tiny bots that can physically change something in your body. 2031, it becomes standard, normal that when you get a child, a nurse or a doctor says, do you want a full genome sequencing of your child? And maybe you say yes, and then you will get just a list of things that you would need to know about for that child. And then the last one I have is that all these liquid biopsy data that will be extracted from people about cancer will go into a big data banks and give us a lot of incremental information about cancer. So then we go to the specific anti-aging technologies, the ones that will not just keep you healthy or treat specific diseases as we described them today, but will also go in and directly address the central elements of aging. So 27, which is very close, it's expected that senolytics drugs will be launched. So these are drugs that go in and remove dysfunctional cells in your body. And a very big part of aging is that you have these cells that should die because they're done doing good for you, but they hang around like zombies and they pollute your environment. They actually release toxins and so on. In 2028, we'll have launched rapamycin and mTOR inhibitors. This is something also that has central effect in the aging process. 2030, NAD and boosters launched, yet another anti-aging technology. 35, anti-aging gene therapies are launched. So these are therapies that go in and go to the core of some of the aging process. So this is more radical. 2040, telomere extension launched. So telomeres are at the end of our DNA some non-coding sequences, and we lose every time a cell divides, some of this drops off, which is not a problem until all of it has dropped off, because the next time the cell divide, you start losing coding DNA, and then you really start developing dysfunctional cells. So if we can extend these telomeres, then we can postpone or avoid this problem. And 2045, cellular reprogramming launched, where you can simply go in and reprogram a cell to do something entirely different, or something to do something better than it did before. So these are examples of what's going on. And what you and I have discussed is what are the overall consequences that we can expect of this for the aging of a person. And you actually made this example where you say, let's take a person who is 50 years old now, and let's see what, if that person tries to live reasonably healthy now, but then gets access to all these anti-aging medications as they get released, what will happen to the biological age? So if we look at the chronological age, that's the orange line here, that's a straight line. So within 25 years, from let's say from 2025 to 2050, of course that person will go from being 50 to being 75. But if the person takes all this medication as it becomes available, the biological aging process will slow down. And this is what we have illustrated with this blue curve that kind of bends downwards. And the overall result is that the person kind of almost stops aging at an age of about 62. So this is, of course, some of the things that people hope for when we talk about this longevity escape velocity. And some people have very super radical expectations for this. The most extreme is Ray Kurzweil, who I saw this on social media. It says Ray Kurzweil explains that if you can stay alive for another 5 years, you can live for 500 years. Oh gosh, I'll take 2 of those, but I've not been able to find any serious person other than him who believes that. But we have looked at what other people who work in the field have predicted, and this is illustrated with the chart that you see here. So now you see this dotted horizontal line that represent the biological age that Ray Kurzweil thinks is realistic. So that starts in 2030. Then we have Aubrey De Grey, more conservative but still interesting. So if he's right, then our person who is 50 now will perhaps stop aging at a biological age of 57 or so. And then you have Sergey Young, who is more conservative still. So he talks about longevity escape velocity in 2045. But that means that the person will be in the early 60s and then kind of go into, if not eternal life, then very good health until something goes bad anyway. So this is some of the backdrop we have for this discussion.
Yeah, it's interesting. With my discussion with Aubrey De Grey, he kind of explained why it will take some time to get longevity escape velocity. So what he said is that the treatment needs to be comprehensive in the way that you need to treat everything, not perfectly, but you need to treat every part of aging. Otherwise, you're just going to die from the part that you did not treat or that you can't treat. But it was also interesting to see how much he differs in his thinking about longevity versus, for example, Kurzweil or Bryan Johnson. So I thought let's dive a little bit into that.
The measures of biological age that we have today are very inaccurate, incomplete. And I'm talking here about all the kinds of measures. I'm talking about the ones that people talk about a lot these days, the omic ones, especially the epigenetic ones. And I'm also talking about the more traditional things, based on function, things like measuring grip strength and gait speed and memory and so on. You may be, if you try to condense all of that down to one number, then it's going to be inherently incomplete in terms of what it tells you. What we really want to emphasize is that one is as biologically old as one's weakest link. In other words, even if there's anything wrong, you might even have detected it, but it will be enough to ensure that you don't live significantly longer than you would have lived anyway.
What's very different about Aubrey De Grey is he separates, I think, himself a lot from the science. So he doesn't do a lot of things, as far as I can understand, to lower his own biological aging. For example, I understand that he smoked up until quite recently. He does not abstain from drinking alcohol, for example. He's not spending too much time doing exercise, and he doesn't really believe in supplements. And on the other part of that, you have Kurzweil. I don't think he's doing that much exercise, but correct me if I'm wrong. But he takes a whole bunch of supplements. And now I wanted to discuss, I think, a very special character who is, I would call him a really longevity celebrity. I wanted to discuss Bryan Johnson with you. So what are your thoughts on Bryan Johnson? Do you think, is he brilliant? Is he crazy? Or is he somewhere in the middle? What's your thought?
Well, I think, first of all, I think he's very useful for mankind because he's making himself into a science experiment. And I know normally in science experiments you want to have more than one person and a lot of reference groups and so on. But it's still interesting that a person decides to do so much, and then we can measure the results. And there's this website. What is that website called where people are entering how slowly their biological aging progresses?
Yeah, it's called rejuvenationolympics.com. It's actually, I understand that it's Bryan Johnson's own website, where you can see some different things on the website. I think we can just get it up here on the screen. We can see how slowly people age. So you can see, for example, if it says 0.6, it means that for every year you actually only age 60%. So somewhere between 7 and 8 months is the actual amount you age. But you can also look at what is the measured biological age of a person versus the chronological age. So yeah, that's rejuvenationolympics.com.
Yeah, so there was this girl who was aging slower than him, and so he's been spending $2 million a year, and she's not really spending much. She's just living healthy in other ways. So we don't know what the conclusion from all this is, but I think, as I said, it's very interesting that somebody goes all in on everything. What we really need is some big data. It would be wonderful if there were huge amount of people on that website, and they were very, very detailed in the description of what they're doing and not doing, so we can begin to learn from that. Because, well, I think we should listen to what Aubrey De Grey says about all these things.
Yeah, so one of the things that also really surprised me talking with Aubrey is from this clip.
It's completely unclear. There have been some studies that show that people who take a lot of supplements on average live slightly less long than people who don't, but I wouldn't read too much into that either. I think the key message is that everyone's metabolism is different. Everyone has slightly different needs, different strengths and weaknesses in how their body works. And that means that different things are going to benefit different people. The only thing that I will say is that the magnitude of the benefit is likely to be really rather small compared to the magnitude that I'm hoping to bring about by technology that's on the horizon. Maybe you might get a year or two out of extra life if you do these kinds of things, if you're lucky. Now, of course, the fact that different people are different means that the more you can do to understand your own metabolism, to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, the more likely you are to be able to benefit yourself by such means. And Bryan Johnson is setting a really important example in that regard by measuring absolutely everything he can and doing and constantly tweaking his regime accordingly. One doesn't have to be spending $2 million a year on oneself the way Bryan does in order to do that. But yeah, I mean, it's important to keep in mind the magnitude of the best case scenario.
what he's basically saying here is that he does not believe a lot in supplements because there's no evidence that you will actually live longer when you take the supplements. And the reason that surprised me is because you have people like Bryan Johnson, you also have David Sinclair, and apparently that is one of his friends, and Kurzweil. They all take a lot of supplements. What Aubrey says is there's no reason to focus that much on supplements. Actually, he says your focus should be making sure that longevity technology comes before, and the best thing you can actually do there is to invest in longevity by funding or donating to some of these projects.
But what would kind of be the top 3 pieces of advice you would be giving to people who would like to, well, be there for LEV and to keep their biological age low?
Well, the 3 types of advice of the kind that you're looking for are very boring. They are essentially, they come down to live the way your mother told you to. Don't get seriously overweight, don't smoke, get enough sleep, have a reasonably varied diet. But of course, the real answer is that because the issue is how soon it's going to happen, one of the biggest things you can do is to try to make it happen sooner. By, obviously some people are wealthy enough to be able to make a difference by supporting the research financially. And I spend a painful amount of my time raising money to do, raising small amounts of money to do the most important work.
I mean, you could either take the approach where you do a lot to address your own aging, like with exercise and supplements, or you could take the approach saying, well, that doesn't matter that much. What really matters is that we all fund the technology so that we will have age rejuvenation as soon as possible.
Well, I think it's 2 separate discussions, so it's not one or the other for any given person. We have the capital markets that quite efficiently allocate money to research that shows some promise. And there are commercial money and there are public money and there are grant money. But I think that what he says about supplements is interesting because I have a couple of people who advise me on health, and both of them have said that nothing bad in taking supplements, but it's not nearly as important as getting your sleep, trying to be happy, just get your sport and living and drinking reasonably healthy. So based on what I hear from people who are not trying to sell me any supplements and cannot make any money on it, I think supplements is marginal. But we're also learning more about supplements all the time, so they probably get more targeted, get better. There are some examples, and Aubrey actually mentions that. He mentions that there's some research that indicate that you live shorter if you take supplements, but there have also been examples, for instance, that if you take antioxidants, you actually live shorter because your body is supposed to learn to tackle these things themselves. And this is something that's always interesting, is that if you start putting something into your body that the body could make itself, will it then stop making it? And also, if you take some of this radical anti-aging medication that is in the pipeline that will help cells live longer, does that mean that you get elevated risk of getting cancer? And perhaps the answer is yes. So it's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these experts on longevity, they say, don't treat cancer, treat aging, because cancer is a result of aging. I know there are examples where that's not the case with younger people getting cancer. I think it was on another episode of the Danish part of Supertrends where there was an expert saying, well, if you cure all cancers, you will actually only extend average longevity with like 3 years. We should focus on aging, not so much cancer specifically.
This is a view that I've been told for my personal, I wouldn't even call it program, just my lifestyle, which is where I've had some guidance, is that we get cancer every day. At least think about it that way. Think about, imagine that you get cancer 10,000 times a day. All sorts, and you get just as well. You get infections, you get virus, you get bacteria every minute of the day. By the billions or trillions, and your body figures out to fight it off. So the most important thing is to keep your body in such a condition that it's capable of handling these things. and do that as long as you can. And that's why the kind of background inflammation, as you can call it, this chronic inflammation that everybody actually has, needs to be kept low. For instance, if you have a chronic inflammation in your teeth, gums, that will actually increase your risk of getting a lot of serious diseases, because the body is fighting that, and then it has less surplus to fight, or less capacity, spare capacity to fight other things. And if you are living really healthy, then you tend not to get very ill, you don't get any cold, flu, and so on, because your body is just an efficient fighting machine. And I think that's the most important thing you can do with the technologies that we have right now.
I just wanted to talk about the different approaches that Aubrey also mentions. We have a clip here. What he's basically saying is that money is flowing into longevity research, but there are different ways of approaching them. For example, Ray Kurzweil, who is not actually doing the research, he's very much saying that once we have AGI, artificial general intelligence, we will also get to longevity escape velocity very shortly after that. And I believe that his thinking behind that is, once you have AGI, he believes you can multiply the number of scientists in the world by an infinite number, because basically you would have artificial scientists helping the progress, which is why you would get longevity escape velocity almost immediately. Aubrey quite clearly does not believe that. He also explains how some of the money for research are going in the wrong pockets. These will not be the roads to longevity. I think some of these research studies would be too focused on AI.
In terms of the direct linkage, let's say the causal linkage between high-powered artificial intelligence and reaching LEV, I think one thing we have to very strongly bear in mind, and I will say we have to bear this in mind today, because a number of the most influential people in the field right now are getting this wrong. The reason why AI gets to be good at something is by having experience, having data to work from. Now, in some cases where the things that it's working on are essentially defined mathematically, like playing Go, it turns out that data is not so important, except in the development of the software. But if you're doing anything that is relating to the way that the physical world works, and especially anything related to the world's most complicated machine, namely the human body, then you need a lot of data. And at the moment, we have a lot of some types of data, omic data, lots of genome sequences and such like. And that's very valuable. But there are masses of types of data that are just as vital for AI to have any chance of helping us to get to longevity escape velocity that basically don't exist at all. And those types of data need to be obtained. So the billionaires and such like who are putting serious money into longevity research right now, they badly need not to conclude that work in laboratories is passé and all that matters is to fund the artificial intelligence research. And I'm afraid a few of those people are going in that direction right now. Sam Altman is the most conspicuous one. He put a very significant amount of money, $180 million, into one very good startup company named Retro. But since then, he hasn't done anything like that. And I have on good authority that he's not going to, that he wants to only focus on AI. He's got a very successful AI company, so it kind of makes sense to put a lot of focus on that. But putting an exclusive focus on it is very misguided.
What are your thoughts here? Do you believe more kind of that the road to longevity escape velocity is through the more traditional mouse studies Aubrey and David Sinclair are doing, or do you think just getting to AGI will actually solve a huge part of the problem?
We already are in a situation where we can do super fast simulation of 3D folding of proteins. So proteins, are big, like big spaghettis, and you need to know how they fold in 3D in order to know what they do. So we can do that many orders of magnitude faster with computer simulation than we can do in any other way. And then since we already crossed that milestone, the next one is to have enormous information about what happens if you put this protein together with this protein, or you put this and this and this and this together, and at the end you'll be able to simulate full cells and then full organs and perhaps full bodies of living creatures. But the result of that would be that the cost go down a lot and the speed of progress go up a lot. We still need to check this virtual world against the physical world, because it might not be correct what the computer simulates. So I think we'll still need the mouse studies and other studies to just check what really works. I think that it's a valid point that computers will be so efficient that they will speed up the rate of discovery and bring down the cost of discovery so dramatically that it will really impact these things. But you'll still not release anti-aging medication until you've gone through quite lengthy approval processes. I think that's both camps are partly right.
So I think one of the other really interesting points from the interview with Aubrey De Grey was when he talked about people starting to, you could say, wake up and understand that this is something that is happening. I mean, even though we can disagree about the time frame for longevity escape velocity, he says more and more people are starting to realize that it is real and we will have longevity technologies. What we can see in the clip is that he says within just 3 years, we will start to see people believing in longevity escape velocity, and that will actually change the world in many ways, because people will start to act differently once they actually believe that they will live much longer.
Really, you can think of it as basically it's people feeling that they've got permission to get emotionally invested in this. So yeah, I mean, actually, I believe that that's going to happen a lot sooner. So I talk about a time frame of 12 to 15 years before we achieve the sufficient comprehensiveness to get to longevity escape velocity. But the bigger question is, how soon will most people switch from their current thinking into a thinking that, yeah, this is coming. We don't know how soon it's coming exactly, but we know it's coming fairly soon. I thought about that a lot, because the big question is, how will that change happen? What will be the change in, let's call it the public conversation about all of this, that will shift the public opinion and cause this sea change? And then how soon will that happen? And the conclusion that I came to a long time ago, and I very much believe it still, is that it's all about the more high-profile scientists in this area. So I've obviously been saying since forever that this is coming, albeit I don't know how soon. But none of my colleagues have been doing so until quite recently. A large part of that is because I had the good fortune to be able to get myself into a position where basically I wasn't reliant on being popular. I didn't have to worry about my next grant application being rejected in peer review because I was getting my funding from philanthropy. Similarly, I wasn't a situation in industry where I might, like, the share price of my company might be affected if I started saying controversial things. So I was able to say all this, and my colleagues were not. But now that things have moved forward enough that people are saying somewhat more optimistic things, and there will come a point when most of my colleagues are saying considerably more optimistic things. Actually, there will come a point where people are willing to put timeframes on this. Those timeframes will be probabilistic, just as mine have always been, but nevertheless, that to me is going to be the tipping point, because that's the point at which people like Oprah Winfrey are going to start paying attention and saying publicly that, this is going to happen, and perhaps that we ought to work a bit to, try and get it to happen soon. And the minute that happens, well, you know what happens when Oprah Winfrey says anything, right? So, there's going to be an absolute avalanche. Now, the question then is, when is that going to happen? And, of course, there are not very many high-profile scientists in this area, and we're all good friends. We all know each other's positions very well, and, each other's sensitivities and so on. So I feel I have a pretty damn good read on how much more progress is going to need to be made in various laboratories around the world, including my own, to so that those experts will feel that they have, if you like, permission to say more gung-ho things. And I believe it's only going to be a few years. I think we've got a 50-50 chance of getting there within 3 or 4 years. So then let's think about what the response of the general public is going to be, because this is where it gets terrifying. If you think about it, pretty much all of the big ticket items that drive the global economy, the things that people spend large proportions of their income on, revolve around how long they expect to live and how long they expect to live healthily, right? That determines what kind of pension plan they want, what kind of life insurance, what kind of health insurance, what kind of inheritance arrangements, you name it. So, they're going to they're going to literally almost overnight go from a situation of expecting to live only a few years longer than their parents did, to a situation of expecting, with reasonable probability, to live vastly longer, even though the technologies that will enable them to do so have not yet actually arrived. They're going to demand different things, and nobody's going to be ready. So when I give talks to, pension funds or insurance companies or whatever, the title of my talk is usually Anticipate the Anticipation. In other words, that these companies, and of course not just companies, but also governments and so on, need to be getting ahead of the problem. They need to be figuring out what products people are going to want when they have a different expectation and how to deliver those products. And I normally put it in mercenary terms. I say, listen, if you don't do this anticipation of the anticipation, then you're going to go bankrupt awfully soon because your competitors will have done and so on. But the point is, these are people who are particularly susceptible to the logic of trend analysis. They make all their predictions that way, which means that, these people are terribly courteous to me usually, but I get the very firm impression that they'll go away and sleep on it, and the following morning they'll wake up and it was all a bad dream and they'll just get on and do what they were doing anyway, which is not good. So I'm trying to fix that, but it's an uphill battle.
So I think one of the trends we will see is that like the likes of Bryan Johnson and all the other longevity gurus out there, they will continue to gather momentum in terms of followers and people listening to them. And I think it will really start to hit the mainstream in a couple of years. From kind of a business perspective, what kind of impact are you seeing currently, and what do you expect to see?
We can see now that there's a big and growing business in supplements, and supplements just a few years ago were just very focused on just ginseng or some natural stuff, and but then it's becoming more and more pharmaceutical, I would say. But the other thing is that you get these health clinics that focus more on preventive healthcare instead of treating diseases. And I think that will be a huge growth trend. One problem, of course, is that this comprehensive health screening once a year or even perhaps more often is quite expensive, so it's not for everybody, but the prices will surely come down because the prices of every element of it come down and because of competition. So I think that would be very big. When Aubrey says that he thinks that this will begin to evolve as a mania within 3 to 4 years, what he says in the interview is that he can see that more and more serious people that other people listen to are switching around and beginning to find that you can actually openly talk about the possibility of longevity, escape velocity, or something similar. That number keeps going up, and at some point, and that is perhaps in 3 or 4 years, more than half the people that any interested person listens to will have that view, and then people will start thinking, oh, this has got to be right, and so we get the mania there, and which can become like a complete frenzy, because after all, if you look at human history, not many things have interested people more than getting access to eternal youth. Love, perhaps, money, perhaps, but eternal youth is really up there, and for many people is number one or number two after love sometimes. But this is the beginning of something very big. And then just as I think sometimes our definition of general artificial intelligence is a little bit it's not that such a clear or such an important milestone to talk about. I think also the longevity escape velocity will be depend on the person, because some this is also what Aubrey says is, let me put it in my own words, that you have 10 ticking time bombs in your body, 10 things that will kill you at some point. And then technology disable one time bombs and disarm another. And after a while, 9 of the 10 have been disarmed, but number 10 goes off and dead you are. The question is, the worst time bomb in my body and in your body, will they be disarmed early or late? So we don't know that. And that's why you might have a situation where some people certainly seems to be just flowing into eternity and not aging and not dying, and other people, they just get hit by something. And that's why he also says that the longevity trend, statistical longevity trend, will not be smooth, because once you kind of disarmed all these common time bombs, then certainly everything becomes very different, because then you get these incredibly long living people, and we're very far from that right now, but that could happen within the next 10 or 20 years.
Are you starting yourself to take some different decisions because of this technology? Are you thinking about kind of your own lifespan in a different light now?
I have not personally planned for a longer life, but I have begun to live more healthy. Early in my career, I actually lived super unhealthy, because I was working unbelievably hard to drive international startups with jet lag and all the rest of it. But I'm trying to. I hope that I'm aging slower biologically than I'm doing physically now.
Are you considering measuring your biological age? I mean, for myself, I'm really thinking about buying one of these tests or going to a clinic.
I haven't looked into that. What I know is that experts say that there's no single test that is like a magic way to measure it. So you should probably look at the average of a number of different indicators, and then you get a kind of rough idea of what your physical age is. And still, you also need to know that, let's say that it says your physical age is whatever, 45 or 27 in your case, but you still have this time bomb ticking inside you that you don't know about, or that you know about but you can't fix. So we really want to know, the whole story if we can.
I think it's a good point, because I mean, for example, if you were so lucky to get told that your biological age was in the 30s and not in the 50s, for example, but it did not reveal that you had this time bomb, it doesn't really help you anything, right? You can still fall dead in your 60s. So I think that one will be very important. A lot of people would say, well, this is all good and interesting, but it's also super confusing with all these different pieces of advice, like should I take a ton of supplements, should I do a lot of exercise? Personally, I think it stops a lot of people from even getting started, because they're like, since there's so much different advice, they're like, I don't even know what to take, which advice to follow, so they're not following any. Which I think is kind of a shame, right? I think doing something, following something, is probably a lot better than not addressing aging at all.
Well, I think if people find it so complicated, I think that the best advice is quite simple. Eat and drink healthy. Get your water. Don't drink enough, too much alcohol. Don't eat or drink a lot before you go to bed. Stop some hours before. Drink coffee, but not in the evening. Perhaps not even in the late afternoon. Get your sleep. Go to bed so early that you can sleep without using an alarm clock. When you wake up, move quite quickly. And start moving. See the sunlight quite quickly, so the body understands that it's morning now. So start counting down to when it's evening. Don't look at the bright screens in the evening, because then you don't sleep as well. Do a combination of aerobic and strength training. maybe 3 or 4 times a week or more. And make sure that you never sit still for very long. So even if you have an office job in a chair, remember to get out of that chair, walk a little bit around in circles. I do that when I am on the phone, not even thinking about it. It's just what my body likes. So I'm always pacing forth and back when I'm on the phone. And so I do a lot of work actually when I exercise, because I can just listen to things and talk with people when I'm exercising. These kind of things are well within reach of almost anybody, and they're not complicated, and I don't know how long time it took me to explain that, but that will do a hell of a lot to make you live healthy for a longer time. Yeah, so since it has turned out that being happy is a major contributor to staying healthy for a long time and also living longer, that also means that don't create a regime for yourself that makes you unhappy. I mean, try to make a healthy regime that enables you to be happy as well. So some of the things that are healthy are directly making me happy. For instance, I feel on a day where I don't do sport, I am clearly less happy than if I do sport. So the sport makes me happy. My coffee makes me happy. And coffee is for almost anybody something that's really healthy. So a number of the things that are healthy makes you happy. Seeing the sunlight early in the morning makes me happy, and so on. But let's say that I'd say that I have concluded that I don't eat red meat and don't drink red wine because they are unhealthy. Well, okay, so some friends ask me home for dinner, and they serve beef and red wine, red meat and red wine. Does it make me more happy to enjoy this, or does it make me more happy to tell them, sorry, the food and drink you made for me is outside my regime, I want special food, and then I never get invited again because they find me annoying? So I think you also have to allow some space for yourself, where you say you can do indulgences, and you also have to prioritize the social well-being with other people, and making other people happy, and so on. So don't overdo anything.
I have also implemented a lot of more healthy best practices, but I'm still having my morning coffee. I'm still accepting a glass of wine here and there because I enjoy it. So I think there's a good point in try to stay happy. We haven't talked that much about stress, but I think stress is a major factor for staying young, and probably one of the hardest things for people to eliminate. So I think as part of the advice, like consider what makes you happy, and potentially consider what stresses you out, and see if you can reduce that.
Yeah, and that's a whole big area, because there's a whole tool set of mental approaches that make you more happy, and as a part of that also reduces stress. So reducing stress is not only a question of avoiding things that give you stress, but it's also developing a mentality where these things don't give you stress. And so you can become far more resilient over time if you work with different mental techniques. But I think this is a theme for another podcast, because it's absolutely huge.
I think I want to end the podcast this time just discussing a final thing. I had a lot of comments from people saying, okay, it might happen, but it will only be for the rich. Or some said, yeah, it might happen, but governments will kind of restrict these treatments to the powerful or whoever agreed with them politically. Personally, I kind of disagree with that. I think the benefits for society having kind of curing aging and curing diseases will be so great, so that it might be for the rich in the beginning, but prices will decline, and then this technology will be for everybody. But it's quite clear that most people do not share my point of view here. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's several thoughts. First of all, if you look at medical cost per capita in any developed society, a completely disproportionate part of your lifetime medical costs are incurred when you're in the process of dying. So you get this really hard disease at the end of your life, and you spend a lot of time in hospital and whatnot. But that only happens once in your life. So the longer the life is, the smaller percentage of your lived years will be in such dire straits. So it will be a good business for society in terms of medical cost per year per capita to keep us healthy for longer. Second, we see from a lot of statistics in wealthy countries that the birth rates are declining and are well below replacement ratios. In some countries, really catastrophically below, one would say. But we can offset that partially by living longer. And the third thing is that the people get wiser with age, and they also get more peaceful, because a part of being wiser is to become more peaceful. So I think that a world where people on average are healthy but older will be more peaceful and behave more intelligent and socially more mature, so there will be advantages there also. The last thing I want to say is that technologies do tend to start with being for the few, and then eventually it's for everybody. Prices will come down, and we have seen with technologies over the last many years that a lot of them have been in extreme decline in terms of the cost per treatment or cure. So it will become available over time for everybody. And the reason it becomes available for everybody at a low cost is that it's available for the wealthy people now. And so they help make it into a mass market, which then becomes available earlier than otherwise.
Thank you, Lars. I think we'll conclude it here. But see you soon.